The Neon Owl Diner sat at the edge of nowhere. A two-lane blacktop stretched past it like a scar through the wilderness, and most nights, no more than a car or two passed between midnight and dawn. That was just fine with Sam. He'd been working the graveyard shift since April, since his parole officer said he needed something steady. Fry cook, dishwasher, sometimes server when Nora, the usual waitress, called out, which she often did. Sam didn't mind the quiet. He preferred it, actually. Just him, the sizzling of bacon, and the endless hum of the soda machine. It was 2:13 a.m. when the bell above the diner door jingled. Sam looked up from the grill. The parking lot had been empty. He was sure of it. A man stepped inside. He was tall, his shoulders hunched under a long, soaking wet trench coat. No hat, no umbrella. Rain hadn't been in the forecast, but his hair clung to his face in slick strands, dripping onto the checkered floor. "Evenin'," Sam said warily. The man didn't respond. He made his way to the last booth in the corner and slid into the seat like he'd been there before. The overhead light flickered faintly above him. Sam could barely make out his face in the shadow. Sunken cheeks, pale skin, hollow eyes that seemed to reflect nothing at all. Coffee?" Sam asked, wiping his hands on a rag. Still no answer. Sam poured a cup anyway and set it on the table. The man didn't look at it, or him. Just kept staring out the window into the dark like he was waiting for something to crawl out of the woods. Sam went back to the counter, glancing at the man in the reflection of the pie case glass. He didn't blink, didn't move, just sat. A minute passed, then 5. When the bell rang again, Sam jumped. This time it was a woman. Young, maybe late 20s. She wore a red hoodie soaked with sweat, not rain. Her breathing was labored, eyes wide and darting like a hunted animal. She looked around and locked onto Sam. "Did he come in here?" Sam blinked. "Who?" She pointed to the booth. "Him, the man in the coat." Sam turned. The booth was empty. He blinked again. The coffee was still there, untouched and steaming. He was just there," Sam stammered. The woman backed away toward the door. "If you saw him, you need to leave. Now. Don't stay here." "Whoa, hang on. What's going on?" She looked over her shoulder at the dark woods beyond the road. "He only shows up where something's about to happen. He's not a person. Not anymore." Sam chuckled nervously. "Lady, you need help." "No," she said, voice trembling. "You do." The bell jingled again as she ran back out into the night. Sam stood there, heart thudding. The diner was quiet again. No cars passed outside, just the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the faint ticking of the wall clock. He walked to the booth. The coffee was still warm. The seat was dry. Back behind the counter, he tried to shrug it off. Maybe he'd nodded off and dreamed it. Maybe the girl was high or schizophrenic. Maybe they were pulling some elaborate prank. Then he heard the knocking. It came from the walk-in freezer. 3 slow, deliberate raps. Sam swallowed. The only other key to the back door was locked in the office. No one else was supposed to be here. But the knocking came again, louder this time. He grabbed the long spatula from the grill and crept to the back. The kitchen lights flickered, casting his shadow long and twitching on the linoleum. He stopped at the freezer door. Frost rhymed the handle. Knock, knock, knock. Sam tightened his grip on the spatula and pulled the handle open. Nothing. Cold mist rolled out, clinging to his boots. The shelves were stocked with meat and boxes of frozen fries. The bulb inside flickered weakly overhead. He took a step inside. The door slammed shut behind him. He spun and shouted, banging on the steel with his fists. "Hey, let me out!" The light went out. Pitch black. Then, a voice behind him, whispering. "Still warm?" Sam turned, swinging the spatula, but it met only air. He fumbled for the handle, found it, yanked the door open. The kitchen was empty, quiet. He backed out slowly, breath misting. The coffee in the booth was gone. Not just drunk, gone. Mug, saucer, all of it. Sam stared at the table. The seat was ripped now. Deep claw marks slashed the red vinyl. He hadn't seen that before. The bell rang again. 2 teenagers walked in, giggling, oblivious. "Yo, got any fries?" one called. Sam opened his mouth to warn them, but something stopped him. The lights buzzed overhead. The clock ticked. He made their fries, handed them over. Tried to ignore the wet footprints leading from the booth to the kitchen. At 3:33 a.m., the power went out. The diner plunged into silence. Sam stood in the dark for a long time, the fryer popping softly in the cooling oil. Outside, the woods seemed to press closer to the glass. A low hum began, barely audible, vibrating through the walls, like distant chanting. It grew louder until Sam realized it wasn't outside. It was behind the counter. He turned slowly. There, standing inches from him, was the man in the coat. Face pale, eyes black and bottomless. "You shouldn't be here," the man said. Sam tried to speak, but no sound came out. "This place is a door," the man continued. "Tonight it opens." He reached out a hand. Sam backed away, stumbling into the prep station. The man stepped forward, and with each step the world seemed to bend around him. Lights warped, time stretched. Sam felt himself falling, though he hadn't moved. And then it stopped. The diner was normal again. Coffee brewing, griddle sizzling. Sam stood behind the counter. The sun was rising. Nora walked in, sunglasses perched on her head. "You look like hell," she said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Sam looked around. The booth was empty. No claw marks, no footprints, no broken light. "Did anything weird happen last night?" he asked. Nora gave him a look. "Weird? Here? Besides you burning the bacon again? No." Sam turned back to the kitchen. The freezer door was ajar. Inside, someone had etched something into the frost on the back wall. "See you next shift." He wiped it away. He needed this job. And maybe it had all been in his head. Maybe. But when he clocked out, he left a note under the register drawer. If he comes in again, don't talk to him. Don't serve him. Just run. He didn't know if anyone would read it or believe it. But he knew one thing for sure. The graveyard shift at the Neon Owl Diner was never just quiet. It was waiting. The diner sat like a forgotten relic at the edge of Route 57, where truckers rolled by in the dead of night, and the glow from the neon sign flickered more often than it shone. Margot's All-Night Diner, it read, buzzing dimly in the heavy darkness. It was the kind of place people didn't stop unless they were desperate or lost. Jesse, a junior college dropout with bad luck and worse hours, worked the graveyard shift, midnight to 6. The customers were usually truckers, drifters, or the occasional local insomniac. But mostly it was just her, the hum of old fluorescent lights, and the hiss of the coffee machine. She didn't mind the quiet. She minded the loneliness. That gnawing silence between orders when the clock seemed to forget how to tick. It was 2:34 a.m. when the man walked in. Jessie heard the door chime before she saw him. She looked up from her crossword. Pen paused mid-air. The guy was tall, maybe 6'5", wearing an old overcoat soaked from the rain, and a fedora shadowing his face. He didn't take off the hat. That unsettled her. He moved stiffly, almost like his limbs were learning how to operate. He slid into the booth in the far corner, the one under the broken light that never got fixed. Jessie grabbed a menu and approached. "Morning," she said with a smile she didn't feel. "Coffee?" The man didn't answer. He just turned his head slowly, too slowly, and stared at her. His eyes were dark, not brown. Dark, like staring into the end of a long tunnel. Jessie felt something tighten in her chest. "I'll get you a coffee," she said, backing away. Behind the counter, she poured the drink, hands slightly trembling. She glanced up. The man hadn't moved, still watching. She set the cup down in front of him, trying to avoid direct eye contact. "Cream? Sugar?" Again, no response. But this time his hand moved, long fingers with yellowed nails wrapped around the cup. He didn't drink it, just held it like a prop in a play. Jessie went back to her crossword. Every few seconds she looked up, still there, still staring. The wind outside picked up, howling against the windows. The neon sign blinked and went out completely. "Great," Jessie muttered. She walked to the door and gave the sign a thump. Nothing. When she turned back, the man was standing. She jumped. "Jesus!" He hadn't made a sound, not a creak of leather, not a footstep. One moment he was seated. The next, he was at the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked, more cautious now. He leaned slightly forward. His voice, when it came, was dry, brittle, like dead leaves crushed underfoot. "There used to be another girl here." Jessie blinked. "Another girl?" Red hair, big smile, sang to the jukebox. Jessie swallowed. "That sounds like Mel. She used to work here. Quit last winter." "She didn't quit," he said flatly. Jessie laughed nervously. "Yeah, well, she stopped showing up, so same thing, right?" The man didn't laugh. "Did you know her?" she asked. "I came in every night. She always served me." Jessie suddenly remembered something Mel had said once, a few weeks before she left. "There's this guy, always comes in late, never talks, just stares." Jessie's stomach dropped. "She didn't leave," he repeated. "She screamed. And then she stopped." Jessie froze. "What?" The man reached into his coat. Jessie backed up, heart pounding. But he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a photograph. It was old, creased and faded. It showed a girl, red hair, waitress uniform, holding a tray and smiling at the camera. Mel. Jessie took a step back. Where did you get that? She gave it to me before she disappeared. Jessie's breath quickened. Sir, I think you need to leave. It's late and... The man suddenly looked past her, toward the kitchen. She's still here, he said. What? He raised his hand and pointed. In the back, in the freezer. Jessie's blood ran cold. That's not funny. I didn't say it was. Jessie stood rooted to the floor. She could hear the distant whir of the freezer compressor, steady as a heartbeat. I think you should go, she said again, more firmly. The man tilted his head. She called for help. Nobody listened, so she waits. Frozen in time. Jessie reached under the counter and gripped the bat they kept for emergencies. You need to leave. But when she looked up, the man was gone. The door hadn't opened. The chime hadn't rung. He had vanished. Jessie's heart pounded in her ears. She ran to the door and peered out. Nothing. Rain. Empty highway. She turned slowly and stared at the far booth. Empty. The coffee cup still sat there, steaming. Except she hadn't seen him take a sip. Hands shaking, she picked it up. It was ice cold. She backed away, trying to breathe. Maybe she'd imagined it. A hallucination, too much caffeine, not enough sleep. Then she heard it. A knock from the back, not from the back door. From inside the walk-in freezer, Jessie stood still. Silence. Then, another knock. 3 short raps. She stepped toward the kitchen, every nerve screaming. Hello? She called. Is someone back there? Silence. She picked up the phone and dialed 911. Deadline. Not even static. She grabbed her coat, ready to bolt for her car. Then came the scream. It wasn't loud. It was muffled, as if someone were screaming through several inches of meat and metal. But it was a scream. High. Desperate. Help me. Jessie dropped the phone. It came from the freezer. She inched forward, pushed open the swinging door, and stared at the steel walk-in. The light was on inside. The handle turned easily in her hand. The door creaked open. Cold air rushed out. Inside, it looked like any other freezer. Shelves of wrapped meat, plastic tubs of soup stock, frozen fries. And then she saw it. Scratch marks on the back wall, deep gouges in the metal like someone had tried to claw their way out. Jessie backed up. Something moved. From behind the stack of boxes, a shape shifted. A hand. A woman's hand, pale, frostbitten, fingers curled and trembling. Then the face. Mel. Eyes wide with fear, lips blue, hair frozen to her face. She looked straight at Jessie. Help me, she whispered. Jessie screamed and stumbled back. The freezer door slammed shut on its own. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jessie stared at it. The light under the door flickered and went out. When she opened it again, there was nothing. No Mel, no hand, no scratches, just meat and ice and silence. The rest of the shift passed in a blur. She locked the doors, sat behind the counter, bat in hand, until dawn crept over the horizon. When her manager arrived at 6, Jessie told him everything. He didn't laugh. He didn't question. He just looked at her with tired eyes and said, Mel never quit. We thought she just took off. Police said she probably left town. Jessie shook her head. She's still here. The manager hesitated, then opened a drawer beneath the register, pulled out a photo. Mel, smiling, wearing her name tag. She gave me this the night before she vanished. Told me to keep it safe. He paused. Maybe you should take the day off. Jessie nodded, numb. She stepped out into the morning light, wondering if she'd ever come back. Behind her, the coffee machine hissed. And in the far booth, the cold coffee still steamed. The neon sign of Diner 66 flickered erratically, its red and blue glow painting the empty parking lot in sickly hues. The desert highway beyond was a black void, swallowed by a starless sky. It was 11:47 p.m., and I, Ellie Harper, was the only waitress on the night shift, a job I'd taken to fund community college. Diner 66 was a relic, grease-stained countertops, cracked vinyl booths, and a jukebox stuck in the 80s. Most nights, it was just me, Manny the cook, and the occasional trucker sipping coffee. Tonight, though, the air felt heavy, charged with a dread I couldn't name. Manny was in the kitchen, scraping the grill, his radio crackling with distorted mariachi tunes. The fluorescent lights buzzed, and the clock above the counter ticked too loudly, each second a hammer in the silence. I wiped down tables, trying to shake the unease twisting in my gut. The desert outside was unnaturally still. No wind, no crickets, just a suffocating quiet. At 11:59 p.m., the bell above the door jingled. I looked up, expecting a weary traveler, but a man stood there, dressed in a pristine black suit, like he'd stepped out of a funeral. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his eyes seemed to drink in the light. He didn't walk. He glided to a corner booth, his polished shoes silent on the linoleum. "Welcome to Diner 66, I said, forcing a smile. "Take a seat anywhere." He didn't respond, just stared with those hollow eyes. I grabbed a menu and approached, my sneakers squeaking in the oppressive quiet. Up close, his face was wrong, waxen, stretched too tight over bone, his smile showing too many teeth. "Coffee." "Black," he said, his voice a low rasp, like gravel dragged across asphalt. I nodded and hurried to the counter, my hands trembling as I poured the coffee. Manny poked his head out. "You okay, Ellie? You look like you saw a ghost." "Weird customer," I whispered, glancing at the man. He hadn't touched the menu, just sat there, staring at the empty seat across from him. I delivered his coffee, the cup clinking against the saucer. "Anything else?" He tilted his head, studying me. "You're new here." 3 months, I said, voice unsteady. "New," he repeated, as if the word held a secret. He leaned forward, his breath cold despite the steaming coffee. "Do you know what happened to the last waitress?" I froze. Carla, the previous waitress, had quit before I started. Manny said she'd left town suddenly, no explanation. "She moved on, I guess." His smile widened unnaturally. "Moved on. That's what they say." I backed away, heart pounding, and busied myself behind the counter. The clock ticked past midnight. The man sipped his coffee, eyes never leaving me. The air grew colder, the lights dimmer. Manny's radio cut to static, then silence. I called for him, but got no answer. I peeked into the kitchen. The grill was cold, the radio off. Manny's apron lay crumpled on the floor, streaked with something dark. Grease, I told myself, though it glistened like blood. My stomach churned. I grabbed the phone, but the line was dead. Then I noticed the coffee pot on the counter. It was boiling, the liquid inside bubbling violently, though the machine was unplugged. Back in the dining area, the man was still there, his coffee untouched now. Across from him sat a woman who hadn't been there moments ago. Her back was to me, her hair long and matted, like it hadn't been brushed in decades. The bell hadn't rung. "Excuse me," I said, voice barely audible. She didn't move. The man's eyes flicked to her, then to me. "She's waiting," he said. "For what?" I asked, dreading the answer. "For you to join us." The lights flickered, and the woman turned. Her face was a nightmare. Sunken eyes, gray skin, lips cracked and bleeding. She opened her mouth, and a sound like wind through a shattered window filled the diner. I stumbled back, knocking over a tray of silverware. The clatter echoed unnaturally, and the silverware skittered across the floor, arranging itself into jagged letters. "Stay." I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. My reflection in the glass showed my terrified face, but behind me, the booth was empty. I spun around, and the man was inches away, his cold hand on my shoulder. "Don't run," he said. "They always run." I yanked free and bolted for the kitchen, slamming the door and wedging a mop handle under the knob. The kitchen was dark, lit only by the flickering exit sign. I ran to the back door, but it was locked, the key gone. The overhead light sputtered, and in its brief flashes I saw words scrawled in grease on the walls. "You belong here." From the dining area, the bell jingled again. Voices murmured low and hungry like a crowd gathering. The murmurs grew louder, words indistinguishable, but heavy with intent. I grabbed a dull knife from the counter, clutching it like a lifeline. Then came a new sound, slow, deliberate tapping, like fingernails on glass from the walk-in freezer. I crept toward it, every instinct screaming to stop. The freezer door was ajar, cold air leaking out, carrying a sour metallic stench. I pulled it open, knife raised. Inside, the shelves were bare, the walls frosted. In the corner, Manny lay slumped, eyes wide in frozen terror, throat slashed, blood pooling beneath him, half iced. But his hand twitched, and his lips moved, whispering, "Ellie, run!" I screamed, dropping the knife. The tapping ceased. The freezer door slammed shut. plunging me into darkness. The cold bit into my skin, my breaths shallow. Something moved in the shadows, a figure, tall and skeletal, its face obscured, but its eyes glowing faintly. It reached for me, its fingers brushing my arm, cold as death. I clawed at the walls, finding a hidden latch. The door swung open, and I stumbled out, gasping. The kitchen was empty, the mop handle still in place. The clock read 3:13 a.m. The grease on the walls was gone, but the air was heavier now, thick with the smell of decay. I crept to the dining area. The booths were packed with figures, pale, wrong, their faces blurred but eyes glowing like embers. The woman with the ruined face sat at the counter, her head cocked at an impossible angle. The man in the suit stood by the jukebox, now playing a warped Blue Moon. The other figures turned to me, their gazes pinning me in place. "You can't leave," the man said. "The diner keeps what it takes." The floor beneath me shifted, the linoleum rippling like water. Hands reached up from the tiles, cold and gray, grabbing at my ankles. I kicked free, stumbling toward the counter. The coffee pot shattered, spraying scalding liquid that hissed and steamed, forming shapes in the air, faces screaming silently. I ran for the door again, and this time, it opened. The parking lot was empty, the neon sign dead. I sprinted to my car, keys slipping in my shaking hands. The engine roared and I sped away, the diner fading in my rearview mirror. But in the reflection, their faces lingered, pale and unblinking, mouths moving silently, chanting my name. I drove to the nearest town, reported everything. The police found no bodies, no blood, no Manny. The diner was empty, the freezer door open, the walls clean. They said I was in shock, hallucinating. But I know what I saw. I never returned to Diner 66. I moved across the country, started over. But at night, I hear the bells jingle, the tap of fingernails, the warped strains of Blue Moon. Sometimes in the mirror I see them behind me, waiting, their cold hands reaching. Benny's all-night diner was the kind of place that only existed in the dead hours between midnight and dawn. A flickering neon oasis on a stretch of empty highway where the only customers were truckers, insomniacs, and things that shouldn't exist. I took the night shift because I needed the money, plain and simple. College wasn't paying for itself, and the tips, though sparse, were better after dark. The diner was a relic from the 50s, with cracked red vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played static, and a smell that clung to your clothes like grease and something older, something rotten. My first night was quiet. A few regulars, a grizzled trucker named Dale, a woman who never spoke but chain-smoked by the window, and a guy in a trench coat who always ordered coffee but never drank it. Benny, the owner, was a wiry old man with yellowed teeth and eyes that darted to the windows too often. "Rule number 1, he said, jabbing a bony finger at me. "Never unlock the door after 2 a.m. no matter who's knocking." I laughed. "What, like vampires?" Benny didn't laugh back. The first weird thing happened 2 weeks in. It was 3:17 a.m. and the diner was empty except for Dale, who was half asleep over a plate of cold fries. The rain outside was coming down in sheets, rattling the windows like something trying to get in. Then the lights flickered. Not unusual for a storm, but when they came back on, there was a man sitting at the counter. I hadn't heard the door chime. He was tall. Too tall. His limbs just a little too long for his body. His skin was pale, almost gray, and his fingers tapped the counter in a rhythm that didn't match the song on the radio. "Coffee," he said. His voice was wrong, like two people speaking at once. I poured him a cup, my hands shaking. He didn't move to drink it, just stared. Then Dale cleared his throat loudly, and when I looked back, the man was gone. No wet footprints, no money left behind. Just the coffee, untouched. Dale's face was grim. "You didn't see nothing, kid." The next night, the woman by the window finally spoke. "They're watching you," she whispered, her cigarette trembling between her fingers. "They always watch the new ones." I laughed nervously. "Who?" She didn't answer, just stubbed out her cigarette and left, her shadow stretching too far behind her. By the third week, I started noticing other things. The jukebox would turn on by itself, playing a warped version of Blue Moon that slowed down at the end, like the record was melting. The reflection in the bathroom mirror would sometimes blink when I didn't, and once, just once, I saw something move in the alley behind the diner, something low to the ground, with too many joints in its legs. Benny caught me staring out the back door. "You don't go out there after dark," he snapped. "Ever." Why? I asked. He hesitated, then muttered, because things get in. The worst night was my last night. It started with the power going out. Not unusual, but this time the backup lights didn't kick on. The diner was pitch black except for the neon sign outside, casting a sickly red glow through the windows. Then the knocking started. Not at the door, at the windows. Tap, 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 slow, deliberate. I grabbed the flashlight from under the counter, my pulse roaring in my ears. The beam shook as I swept it across the diner. Empty. Then the jukebox crackled to life, screeching like a dying animal. Tap, 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 louder now. I backed toward the kitchen, but the swinging doors burst open before I could reach them. The thing standing there wasn't human. It was tall, its limbs bent at impossible angles, its skin stretched too tight over bones that jutted in the wrong places. Its mouth split open in a grin full of needle teeth. "We've been waiting for you," it hissed. I screamed and bolted for the front door, fumbling with the lock. Behind me, I heard the scrape of claws on linoleum. The door flew open just as something grabbed the back of my shirt. I fell forward into the parking lot, scrambling to my feet as the diner's windows exploded outward. Shadows poured out, twisting, writhing things with too many eyes and too many teeth. I ran. I didn't stop until I reached the highway where a passing trucker nearly hit me. He rolled down his window, eyes wide. "What the hell happened to you, kid?" I looked back at the diner. The neon sign flickered once, then went dark. Benny's all-night diner was gone. They never found the building. No wreckage, no bodies, just an empty lot where it used to be. But sometimes, when I'm driving late at night, I'll see a flicker of red neon in the distance. And I swear if I listen too closely, I can still hear the jukebox playing. You never really notice how loud the silence is until you're alone at Edna's diner past midnight. It was my first solo graveyard shift. Marcy, the usual night server, had called in sick, and I was the only other person they could get on such short notice. Edna's is one of those chrome-plated 24-hour diners clinging to the edge of a dead town, just off Highway 81, surrounded by pines that look like sentinels in the dark. The place used to be a bustling pit stop back in the day, but now the only people who come in after midnight are truckers, drunks, and the occasional hitchhiker. Or at least that's what I thought. The shift started like any other, cleaning counters, refilling salt shakers, making bad coffee. Around 1:15 a.m., a man came in, pale, thin. He looked damp, like he'd just walked out of a fog. "Coffee," he croaked, settling into the last booth by the windows. I poured him a cup. He didn't look at me, just kept staring out into the trees like he was waiting for something. I went back behind the counter and tried to read a book, but I kept glancing at him. He never blinked. Then came the second one, a woman this time. She wore a long red coat, even though it was summer. Her lips were cracked, and her eyes were too wide, too shiny. She sat 2 booths down from the man. "Decaf, please," she whispered. Her voice was a breath, almost a hiss. I brought it to her and tried to make small talk. She just smiled with teeth too sharp. They didn't acknowledge each other, but they both kept watching the trees. By 2 a.m., the diner felt colder. The fluorescents flickered for the first time since I started working there. That's when the lights in the parking lot went out. Boom! Boom! The sound came from deep in the woods. Not a normal boom either. It had rhythm, like heavy footsteps. Something big. The pale man sat straighter. The woman gripped her cup so tightly I thought it would shatter. "Lock the doors," she said suddenly. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Now!" she hissed. I obeyed, not because I understood, but because her voice made my bones itch. As I turned the bolt, I looked outside. There was movement between the trees, something long, low to the ground, slithering, but with legs, multiple legs. I stepped back from the door and tried to laugh. "It's probably just a bear," I said aloud. The pale man barked a laugh, if only. At 2:13, the third arrived. He didn't open the door. He was just there, inside. One moment there was an empty stool at the counter. The next, a hulking figure sat on it. His eyes were milky white, skin stretched too tight over a lopsided skull. He smelled like old meat and mildew. I didn't ask what he wanted. He just stared at me, tapping a single yellowed fingernail against the counter. Tap, tap, tap. The red-coated woman slid out of her booth and walked toward him. "Not tonight," she said, voice low. He grinned, revealing too many teeth. "You can't stop it." She looked at me. "Where's the cellar?" "In the back, near the pantry." "Go," she said. "Now." I ran. Behind me, I heard growling, not from one thing, but many, dozens of voices. Some sounded like children, some like pigs, some like nothing I've ever heard before. I yanked open the cellar door and started down, barely noticing the woman pushing me along. The pale man followed last, slamming the door behind him. In the dark, with only the buzzing bulb swinging above the stairs, I asked what was going on. "They've come through again," the woman said, voice calm now. "Same night, every decade. What are they? Hunters, crawlers, shadows. Call them what you want. They're old, hungry. Why the diner? It's a weak spot, a wound in the world." I started to hyperventilate. "I just serve hash browns," the pale man snorted. "Welcome to the graveyard shift, kid." From upstairs came the crash of shattering glass, screams, high-pitched and wet like animals being slaughtered. Then silence. For a while we just sat there in the dark. I could hear them moving above us. They dragged things, chittered, sniffed. Something scraped the trap door. Thump, thump. Then, in a voice that sounded like me, it said, "Open up, Ben, it's safe now." I stopped breathing. My name. It knew my name. "Don't listen," the woman whispered. "It sounds just like me." "It always does," she said. "They wear your memories like masks." The thing outside started humming. It was the song my mom used to sing to me when I was little, word for word, note for note. I covered my ears and wept. At 4:44 a.m., the noises stopped. The pale man waited another full hour before creeping up the stairs. He opened the door slowly, a silver knife in his hand. "Clear," he said. We emerged into the ruins of the diner. Blood smeared the walls, but there were no bodies. Just claw marks, broken furniture, and something scribbled in black ooze on the wall behind the counter. Till next turn. The woman lit a cigarette with a shaking hand. "It's over? For now," the man said. "They'll be back." I looked at them. "Who are you?" "Guardians," the woman said, sort of. "Why me? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "They never do," she said, sighing. "Most people don't survive their first shift." The pale man handed me a silver coin. "Keep this on you, always, and maybe consider a different job." I never went back to Edna's. I quit the next morning, moved 2 states away. I never talk about that night, not to anyone. But sometimes around 2:13 a.m., I swear I hear humming outside my window, and I never ever open the door. Thank you for listening. Hope I didn't scare you too much. If you like my stories, please consider giving me a like and subscribe. See you next time.